And if we don't, then it's sort of full tribute to you for making the effort to come out tonight to participate in this particular event, where we're going to hear from 3 speakers and give you the opportunity to do some networking, have a few drinks and nibbles after the event as well. There'll be time for questions as well during the course of the evening, so do feel free to be pondering what you might like to ask us as the evening wears on. So by way of introduction, as you can see, networking really is the theme of tonight, and how to make full use of your network. The reality is that hard work, graft is massively important, but who you know and how you can develop your connections and opportunities that arise from it is something that's really important. And we'll hear from people at different stages in their different careers as to how they have used it, how they think they will use it, passing on some top tips, and really keen to hear from you in terms of your experiences as well. So in terms of housekeeping, we're not expecting a fire alarm. The bad news, those of you that have glanced over this way will see that a really impressive green facility where on one occasion a few years ago we had the Queen doing practice for Trooping of the Colour. And we get sports fixtures and all sorts of things going on. If there is a fire, we go that way, not that way. So we end up on the road, Bun Hill Road, to congregate there should there be the need to do so. So we're not expecting an alarm. We will guide you out, but the signage as you go outside the room, there is a green figure that is heading towards the exit. That's the one that we would follow to end up out there. And if I could ask you to put your mobile phones onto silent for us, that would be great as well, so we don't get disturbance. So we have 3 speakers this evening, and I will introduce them to you as they speak, and they will also have the opportunity to tell you more about themselves and their career and their top tips and their experiences. But Emma Lilley, Emma on the far side here, is in-house potter. She'll tell you more about that. A former University of Law student and now somebody who is making their way in the professional world with responsibilities for UK and Ireland. So she can tell you more about that. And also teaches as part of the Junior Lawyer Development Programme here at the university. Colin, in the middle, will tell you about his work with residential and commercial property owners and investors, and will also give you some insight around PROPARTY, which is a networking event which is bringing together those people involved in the property sector for laughs, conversations, connections, etc. And has a huge Christmas event coming up, which he may drop into conversation as well. And then we have a real life University of Law current student in Meg, who is here in the Moorgate campus. So this is very much a busman's holiday, coming away from campus to come back to campus this evening, and is a future trainee solicitor at Weil Gottlieb Manges LLP, which is a tremendous achievement working in the corporate sector. So that will commence later on this year, and also involved in something called Grow Mentoring. So an opportunity for you to hear from Meg at an early stage in her career, but one that's already made significant inroads and taken advantage of networking. So we'll hear for each of those individuals in turn. I'm just going to set the scene for you this evening and give you my top tip for networking, on the basis that later on this evening we will gather this wall will come down behind us, and we will gather for a few drinks and some nibbles and the opportunity to chat to each other. My top tip in terms of going to a networking event is having a strong personal introduction. So you've got a little bit of time to be thinking about this as the event. Obviously concentrate on what they're saying, but also be mulling over your personal introduction. Now, if I were to go to an event, I could legitimately introduce myself as John, I'm an accountant. Those 2 things are factually true. And I might find that somebody goes, oh, wow, the name John, that's so unusual these days. Let's talk about the name John. It's fantastic. And you're an accountant. Well, my dreams have come true. I could spend the whole evening, well, not the whole evening, I could spend a lot of time talking to you this evening. But more often than not, I suspect people will be thinking, oh no, I've got stuck with John the accountant. So my introduction would be expanded a little bit to say, I'm John, I'm an accountant. I'm not going to change those facts. I'm proud of both of them. I now work predominantly with law students. helping them to develop the employability skills to be successful in the modern workplace, and talking on subjects like networking, which I feel I certainly developed the skill in as a result of being a sports commentator for a number of years. So that's 11 seconds longer than I'm John, I'm an accountant, but it's an awful lot more interesting, at least I hope you think it is. You now work with law students. You used to be an accountant. Well, how did that happen? And you're talking about the employability skills necessary for the modern world. What are those? Crikey, let's talk about AI. Let's talk about, what's happened in the last few years. And the modern workplace. Are people working from home these days? Are they hybrid? Are they being encouraged to come into the office? And the small matter then of saying, gosh, you were a sports commentator. Let's talk about Euro 2024. And actually, if I start a conversation like that goes on to talk about football for 20 minutes, that's not a bad thing. It's not illegal to talk about sport at a networking event. You find the common ground. You find the things you can build a rapport with somebody. And therefore, actually, it's perfectly legitimate to have a conversation around something that may not appear to be purely professional. You're in a professional setting and it will move to professional talk at some point, but actually, it's about building that relationship. So that's my top tip for you to take away, to think about how you might introduce yourself with something that is factually correct. Don't go making stuff up. It's stuff that's relevant to the occasion, so it will need to be flexed from time to time. And if there's anything in there that's a bit distinctive, a bit different, that always helps. We may end up meeting almost everybody tonight because it's a small gathering. So if that's 15, 20 conversations, it's still difficult to remember everybody, isn't it? What did they say? I can't remember. Oh, he was the one who was a sports commentator. I remember him. That just allows something a little bit different to be taken away if you want to be remembered. So that's my top tip. I'm now going to act as the compere, merely introducing and perhaps probing with a few questions here and there. So let's move to hear from our panel. Emma, I think you're going to speak first. So we'll invite you to either stay on your perch if you wish, or if you wish to come and stand up as well, to talk about your in-house legal career. Social media is a big part of what you do as well. And just generally networking that you can share your words of wisdom with the audience. Emma.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start with something random. I'd like you to shake hands and say hi to the closest person to you that you don't know. So go ahead. If you have to get up, I'm sorry.
Shake hands. I'm John.
How did that feel? Anyone want to give me a descriptive word as to, just one word as to how it made you feel? Normal, good. Any others? Anyone feel a little bit uncomfortable? Got some nods and some perhaps. Let's have a think about why that might be. And then I will go on to explaining why I've put you in that position, because it's kind of setting the context for my career so far. I've felt like that so many times until recently, I would say, in a setting like this, in a corporate setting, in one that's designed to be more relaxed as in relation to becoming a qualified lawyer. But the reason why I think that might have been a little bit uncomfortable was because maybe it was unexpected and you didn't prepare for it and it was a bit off the cuff. You didn't think you'd be doing that right now. John's introduced the event as having some time to network later. So you're like, right, I can chill and I can enjoy it later. I can think about that introduction, but I've put you in that situation that you weren't necessarily prepared for. But I bet now you're thinking about it, you're glad that it's done because you've broken the ice for later. You've got another buddy, right? Someone that you don't have to cling to if you come with a friend, or it's great that some people have come alone. That's even better, so you can get to know more and more people. So back to my career and how I've come to get through feeling that way. So I'll start at A-levels college, not because it's a long way away, I won't take offense if you think that, but because that's where it kind of all started for me with law unexpectedly. I failed my A-levels in college. I opted to do music, French and English. Hated college. It didn't like me either and didn't do so well in that. I was always going to go to uni. I had that academic drive. I did well at GCSE and wanted to be in music technology. I actually visited Huddersfield Uni and planned to study music there. And on the day I got my results, it didn't go too well. and I'd failed them. I'd not got the UCAS points that I needed. So I have got a streak of resilience in me, thankfully, otherwise I would have been a little bit stuck. So I called around unis and said, what are my options? And my local university, Staff's Uni, I'm from Stoke-on-Trent, my local university said, we've got a space on the law degree. And I was like, me? I'm not going to do law. Like, there's no chance. They said you'd have to do a foundation year to get through to the law degree, but that might give you some time to realise if that's what you want to do, if you want to go into law. There was no other option for me, and I just knew that I wanted to go to uni. I didn't want to take a year out. So that's what I did. I went straight into it and thought, I'll give it a go. And then if you fast forward, so I did my foundation year, did my first year, and the more that I learned about law, the less I wanted to be a lawyer. So I'd gone in scratch, did not know anything about it. First gen law student, in fact, university student in my family. My dad worked in factories, mum worked in Tesco, and then requalified later to become a nurse. So we've not really got those connections there, and I did feel out of place. So that's the first time I've been very uncomfortable generally in terms of being in these environments. Even in lecture theatres, like, I did not feel like I belonged. And when we had to do a task like that, turn around and introduce yourself to somebody, even though I felt at home in Stoke, I felt like everyone in that room knew so much more than me, and they didn't want to talk to me, and you get this imposter syndrome feeling. So it started there, and it didn't really go for a long time. The switch, and when it did go and when it did change, was when I found what I actually really wanted to do, which was in-house. So I don't know if any of you are interested in in-house, either now or in the future. And even if it's private practice for you, whatever that thing is, if it's legal tech, if it's something else, if it's consulting, business, anything, as soon as you find that, I think that you'll find a lot more comfortable in the environments. So back to where I discovered in-house, I took a gap year. Don't forget, I was so fed up of law, right? I didn't want to do it. It was like, why am I even here? I'll take a gap year. And I was working part-time at the time for a company, Bet365, a gambling company, and they offered to take 60 Stokies to Australia to set up the Australian venture of the company. And we had to train people. We trained the Aussies, and then in the evening we went out on the boats. It was an incredible, different way of life. But the main benefit that I got from that was realizing that this company, Bet365, had in-house lawyers. It was amazing. So I was like, this is something that I could do, right? And then all of a sudden, I'd found my path, and I was attending events and feeling comfortable. I was long gone and long forgotten with those law fairs that I'd gone to the train home on crying because I didn't feel comfortable there. So I think the first tip for networking is make sure that you're in a position where you feel like you want to be there. I think sometimes, and I was talking just a little while ago with John, there's so many events and so many options and things to go, and then we put ourselves in those situations and we don't feel as comfortable as we could do. But really, why are you there, and who do you want to speak to? And what would it interest you in learning? What do you want to know more about? How can your career be advanced through those networking things? So weaving that networking skill into my journey, I think that's the main top tip that I would give you there in respect of that. A tiny bit on in-house versus private practice, but only in respect to networking and how that might differ. So again, I didn't know anybody, didn't know anything about training contracts, what I needed to do. So I was like, I'm going to have to build up an in-house network. How do I do that? I started on LinkedIn. So I started looking for people who had the career path that I wanted, and then thought, oh, that they'd be really great to get to know. Where are they hanging out? What have they done? What have they studied? And does that suit me? And if I'm very interested, I'm going to be interested in those people as well. So I built up that network online, first of all, because I was so shy and just didn't know how to speak to people, basically. Didn't know how to deal with these situations. But I had a hunger. So I was like, I really want to get to know these people. So I started off online for in-house. And then, yeah, the specific events for in-house, they are there. But I think the point goes for whatever interest you find. So if you see an event that's specifically for where you want to be, you will naturally feel more comfortable there networking and hone your skills because you want to be there, you want to talk to the people, you've got something to add to the conversation, and so have they. Skipping forward to what I do now, and thanks, John, for mentioning the 15 jobs that I've got at the moment. I am full-time, but 4 days a week, so condensed hours, as a senior in-house lawyer. I'm head of legal for the UK and Ireland for a HR and payroll company, and we do the payroll of huge customers, clients all over the world. and I look after the UK and Ireland. How I got there was training in-house. I then moved to Manchester Airports Group. We looked after East Midlands, Manchester and Stansted, and then pandemic hit, decided I need to leave, and then hopped to where I am now, which is called SD Worx. What I've learned through that is, again, you've got to find your people. And I still had this urge to do something else in terms of extra people that I wanted to meet. I love my job. I love the culture. I've specifically created my career around something that works for me, but I needed something else. So I built this online platform that keeps me in my job. I say to people all of the time, like people that follow me or engage, like, you guys keep me in a job, because if I couldn't change something about the industry, then I wouldn't be in it, because I'm so passionate about different things relating to careers. So I created that online, and the networking side of that I've built has been so beneficial to me personally. The opportunities that arise, I speak for ULaw, I speak for other people, I get to teach, and then I'm building more and more skills. And the more people that get to know me through that and I get to know them, obviously there's filters there. So you can filter people that aren't necessarily your cup of tea or their cup of tea. You're not necessarily going to like everyone and want to network with them all the time. But the key there is realizing what you are looking for. So first, put yourself in those places where you feel a little bit more comfortable, hone that skill, find your direction through learning through others, and then create something perhaps that might give you that passion and make it light even more. So that's my introduction. Hope that was helpful. Over to Colin. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. And I can see one or two people writing down a few notes. And you all take your own individual things away. But a couple of things that just struck me from what Emma said. Find what you love. You know, we're all going to be working for a long time. You guys have got longer to work than I have, but I've still got quite a long time to go. So you've got to do something that gets you out of bed in the morning. And you don't necessarily know what that is until you've tried it. And trying a few things and meeting people and hearing their stories about what they're, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. That's what I want to do. And you might find some things that don't work along the way, but at least by trying, you do. And then obviously the power of LinkedIn, really powerful tool for connections, but also to see what people have done and watch their story and think, oh yeah, I like that bit, or I've never heard of that bit. It's not stalking if you do it professionally. It's just really interesting to see what people have done. And you can reach out. There's a question later on that someone submitted about how do I make connections. So we'll perhaps talk about that in a bit more, but reaching out to people and saying, I'm really interested in what you've done in your career. Would you mind telling me a bit more about it? Well, it's extremely flattering to have that comment, and it's likely that people will take the time and effort to give you something back in return. So thank you to Emma. We will move swiftly along to Colin to hear about his experiences, his career, and his tips for you tonight. Colin.
Thank you, John. Hi guys, my name's Colin. God knows why my parents chose to call me Colin, but it's my name, so please do call me Cole. And that tends to be the icebreaker that I use at networking events. I grew up a very shy lad. I had buck teeth, proper little pot belly. I wasn't the best looking little kid, and I was really shy, and my voice didn't break till I was 18. And imagine trying to introduce yourself. You're talking like this. It's really quite difficult. And that was an insecurity that I've carried forward. Even to this day, I still have that. I still, when I look in the mirror, that's the guy that I still see, not this chap here, which is like fresh out of Essex. And it fueled me when it came to networking and meeting people. And I grew up in a single parent upbringing. I'm not from anything, and I'd never met a posh person before. And working in property, you meet a lot of posh people. And we were instructing Savills on a case, and I was good at my job. I was really good at my job. I've been to uni, I've done property development, and I've managed to find myself a job as an asset manager somehow. And we were instructing Savills on this case, and we had to go down to Mount Street in Mayfair. And I met these two lovely chaps. They were no different to me, no better than me, but they had a wonderfully posh accent. I think one was called Tarquin and one was called I can't remember. It was something the third. Anyway, it was. I had never been so nervous. I was shaking. I was absolutely terrified, and I couldn't get a word out. And I was in my opinion, I was the best at what I'd done at that time, and I was absolutely useless. I just could not talk. And it was at that point when I bowed to myself. I was like, I'm never going to be in that situation ever again, because I was still that little boy from Southend that couldn't talk. I was just this useless kid. Going back to, the power of just social media, LinkedIn was coming in at the time. This would have been 2014, 15, I think. I was kind of hitting the market. And I was like, oh, do you know what? There's a little opportunity on here. I'm going to get on here. And this is when like Facebook was prominent. And it was a way you could be a bit like a keyboard warrior. You could come across really confident, even though you probably weren't that confident. But I was just like posting every day, and I was putting little stuff. It didn't really make much sense. But I decided to start something up called Young Legal Professionals. So I'm a surveyor by trade, and it's not that different to law in terms of the work we have to do and the type of people that we deal with. And this Young Legal Professionals was a chance to bring guys like yourself together into a room and to kind of be in control of that situation. So for me, I don't necessarily like going to networking events because I still get scared because I'm still nervous. But I was like, John, I'm going to host these at my own little events. And we had like 30, 40 people. We had a little speaker, and it was really wonderful. And my confidence really started to grow. I started to move up in my job. And we're working at a family office where I was working, and we were earning good money at the time. And then one of my boss called me in and was like, "Oh, actually, we have to change your commission structure. You're earning too much." And I was like, "Oh, that's effing ridiculous. I'm going to quit." And I had a mortgage at the time. I just quit. Like I didn't really know what I was doing, and I went on to the open market thinking I was worth all this money, and I was not worth all this money. I couldn't even get a job at Purple Bricks. Like I mean, it was. It was a nightmare, and it probably brought me back down to earth. And I managed, just by my connections on LinkedIn, that I managed to go and get myself a little job as head of valuation at this small little firm in East London. Actually hated the job, but I realised that I was able to win work by the network that I'd started to build up from this Young Legal Professionals, and the fact that I was this young guy, put myself out there in what is quite an ageing sector. I was very blessed that my sector is full of kind of old, pale, stale male men, male men, of course they're male men, but you know what I mean. And I just, I was like, I think I can do this on my own. And I'm very lucky that my concern about risk is very little. I'll just in my life, my 3 business partners, you've got one that will look 15 times before he crosses the road. You've got one that does the normal thing, looks right and left and crosses, and then you kind of got me that just walks straight across the road. Like that's kind of my perception of risk. And I was like, "You know what, I'm set up on my own." And then we set up 5 years ago. And in that time, I was fortunate enough to then invest in another firm, which subsequently then bought my other firm, which is where I am today. So I've been very blessed to be in that position, but I couldn't have done any of it without networking. And because I've been to so many networking events that were quite stifling, quite boring, I decided to come up with PROPARTY. And it was just a party. For me, networking, because I've lacked that confidence sometimes in myself, a couple of beers and a couple of Jaeger bombs, they helped. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but it helped me. And we've subsequently put on, well, 2 events under the PROPARTY banner, but we've put on dozens under the YLP or Legal Young Professionals, having 400 or 500 people at these events. Like they're brilliant, and it's full of lawyers because most of my work comes from lawyers. And it's been an amazing opportunity for me to meet people which I've never would have met and put myself into circles which I've never been in. Like this little old me from Southend, like going on, I've done this program on Channel 4, which nobody probably watched. So this is probably my biggest gig from the show, to be fair. So, but I was because of my LinkedIn, I was getting in these opportunities in these platforms, and I keep going back to LinkedIn, but LinkedIn's the one. I wouldn't be anywhere about LinkedIn, and I don't work for LinkedIn, even though you do quote Colin 2010. But I think one thing I've gone a little bit off tangent here, John, but I think it's so important to put yourself out there. And I might come across confident, or you actually probably come across a bit rubbish, but put yourself out there and just ask people for advice. And I've got 2 or 3 young guys now that I help who messaged me just because they saw what we were doing on social media. And it is sometimes it is smoke and mirrors. You don't always put up the negative stuff in your life that's going on. I do try to as much as I can. But it's so important to be authentic and to build a personal brand that you're happy with, because when you go forward for jobs in your career, LinkedIn is where they're going to go straight away these days. And like when I hire staff, I'll go straight to the LinkedIn. If I see they're putting stuff out there, if I see they're confident, they're the type of people I want. They're the type of people that are going to make me as a business owner money because they've got something about them. And it's not all about, little selfie pictures or whatever. You can just put stuff up there that's maybe opinion based, like show something about you. I know it's a little bit different once you get into a law firm. You have to watch what you say a little bit. But one thing I'd love you to take from this is just to really focus on trying to build your personal brand. Because sometimes if you are a bit nervous about networking, it will carry you anyway. Cause people just come and talk to you, and it's so important. And just lastly, because I don't want to dwell on the Channel 4 stuff is still quite a sore subject for me because it didn't go anywhere near as well as I hoped it would go. But it's still on 4OD, so it can speak. But that was a wonderful experience for me, going through something like that when you never thought you'd ever get anywhere in life, and something have that opportunity where you think, 'cause in my head I thought I'm gonna be rich and famous and everyone's gonna be like, "Yeah." And then the viewing figures were terrible, but it opened things up. Like John said, it gave me a line. Well, when I speak to someone, it gives me, oh, I'm that guy from that failed TV show. It just something a little bit self-deprecating, but it just gives you a little bit of something different, a little bit of spice or a herb. I'm Italian, but I don't know why I said that. That's really weird. But just say, like, even you guys just being here is more than I ever done at uni. I struggled at uni. I'm not that academic by nature. I failed landlord 5 times. I nearly lost my whole degree. I couldn't pass the one thing I actually work in now. But just be confident. If you are ever struggling, because I know it is hard sometimes, and a lot of time these things are in the evening, I guarantee you'll always get something out of it. And even if you don't get anything out of it in terms of like a financial return on, like, someone offers you a job or an opportunity, just you being there, you'll see someone that you'll see at another event, and you're just only going to build your confidence. So just well done for being here, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about anything, not anything, like maybe Man United if you want. But yeah, thanks. That's it really.
Thank you very much, Carl. I mean, I think what we've already seen this evening, and we may well hear from Meg on the same subject, is the power of actually listening to someone tell the whole story, and not just that facade of what's on LinkedIn and what's elsewhere, but what goes on behind the scenes. Because I suspect that many of you, possibly even myself, came here this evening thinking, well, these are confident individuals, they wouldn't be putting themselves up for this, but they're just normal people who have the same concerns, fears, etc., and they've had to overcome them. And probably the reason why they're most powerful being here tonight is not because they were natural at doing these things, and very few people are natural. But if you boil it down to networking, is having a conversation with somebody, and usually with one person. You don't need to stand in the room tonight and get everybody flocking around you and say, right, I've got a story. You need to have a conversation with one person, talk to them about themselves, they'll talk. It's a conversation. If you do it one by one, it's an awful lot easier than thinking, gosh, this intimidating environment. But the insecurities that have been voiced there, as indeed we heard from Emma, are things that have been almost consciously approached and thought, well, I can either let this beat me or I can go out there and see what I can do. And there haven't always been triumphs, but keep coming back. And the more you keep coming back, the better you get. And actually, the more rewards you get for it. So really powerful. Be careful crossing the road. Lawyers in the room, and actually just normal people in the room, do check the roads. But remember that, that people are all different. That's the joy. We've got this AI threat coming over us, but people are so wonderful. They're so different in what they bring to the party, and they're unpredictable, and they will change and flex, etc. But that's what makes life exciting. So I think we really embrace the fact that we've got people that will do things in different ways. They will be your clients, they will be your colleagues, they'll be your friends. Some of whom you get to pick because you choose your friends, and you don't get to pick your family, and you don't necessarily get to pick your clients. You've got to deal with whoever they are, and that makes the job so much more interesting. Meg, delighted to hear from you now on your journey so far, and certainly you've accomplished a lot in a short time, but we're delighted to hear what you've got to offer tonight. So over to you.
Thank you, John, and that's a very kind introduction. And as you can see, that slide looks very shiny and very wonderful. But as John said, we're all here with our different backgrounds and our stories, our insecurities and our worries. I'm quite nervous being sat up here tonight. I don't know if you guys are nervous being sat in the audience tonight. So if you're feeling any type of way like that, then we're all in this together, I think, really. And it's quite surreal for me to be up here. As John alluded to, I'm quite early in my career. I'm yet to start my training contract. August or September, when they give me a start date, would be quite nice. But that's a really exciting thing that's kind of on the way. So I thought it might be interesting to kind of share my story a little bit. I'm sure you guys might relate to some of it and maybe not to all of it, but just to show that there's a lot more behind what goes into the things that you see in front of you, rather than just what it looks like nice and shiny on LinkedIn or somewhere like here. But I just wanted to start by kind of thinking about networking in general, and just to say that I think I was always really scared of networking, and I thought that it was this really kind of mystical, mysterious thing that I wouldn't be able to grasp because it was this skill that was just so foreign and alien, and that it was so complicated and it was unique, and you really had to find a perfect way to talk to every person. But I think the truth is that networking is quite simple. I think you can think about it as just friendship or community, or really just having a chat with someone. I don't think that any networking event I've gone to has gone well when I've tried to be quite a corporate, quite a closed off self. But when I talk to people openly about really simple things like the weather or their journey or whatever it is, or even something we have in common like a football team, that just goes a lot smoother. So I think that's kind of my top tip, like don't take networking to be something that has to be really intense and mortifying and scary, because it can be a really good experience. But I guess like the others, to go through a bit about my career journey so far, that might be helpful for you to see where you can go to. So I guess going back like Emma did to when I was younger in school and in sixth form and into university, I had a lot of part-time jobs that were quite classic student jobs, I'd say. I worked as a cleaner, I worked in some administrative jobs. I just did a few different things as and when they came up. And I'm sure a lot of you have done the same as you've been studying. I think all of those things did give me skills in networking and in communication. And I can probably tell you for a fact that if you've worked in any sort of service industry, you've probably got a much better communication skill set than someone who's only been to law school, because trying to navigate those sort of scenarios is hard work. So a round of applause to so many of you. But I guess my journey towards a training contract sounds quite straightforward if you look at my LinkedIn, but misses out a lot of the backstory. I would say I have quite a zigzag or roundabout approach to law. Law was never something I really considered until I was sort of thrown into it accidentally at A-levels. So when Emma was talking about her A-levels, she said she did French and music, and those were the two options I put down at the start of my A-level studies. But unfortunately, where I went to school, it was a rural area, a very small school, and quite underfunded. So both of those subjects were cut very last minute from the syllabus, which meant that I was then handed on the first day a list of all the other subjects I could possibly pick. And I thought, well, I have no idea. I wanted to do French and music. And I saw law on the list and I thought, well, maybe the crime will be fun. I don't know. I was quite a true crime enthusiast at the time, so I thought that would do. And so I did pick law. And I loved it so much. It was probably my favorite subject at A-level. Really, really enjoyed it. I found the logic behind it was really interesting, the morality, all those different elements. And then also kind of the commerciality of things like contract law, I thought was really well suited to me. So at that time, I entered an essay competition to try and win some work experience at a local law firm. And I was very lucky to get in, sat in their corporate commercial department for 3 days and was able to sit with someone who was working on a case that was actually about a local theme park that I'd attended as a child. And it was really interesting just to see the kind of commercial world come together with that black letter law that I'd seen. And I just thought, this is brilliant. But something about me is that I'm really indecisive and really unsure about a lot of things. So even though I'd had these great experiences and I loved law at A-level, I still was really unsure and undecided. And so in my summers when I was in sixth form, I was doing all sorts of crazy things to try and work out what was my next step. I did some teaching assistant volunteering. I was on an archaeological dig site for a few weeks, like everything, left, right, and center. I wrote about 5 different UCAS personal statements for different subjects. I thought maybe I'll do history, maybe I'll do archaeology. No, actually, maybe I want to be a politician. I'll go and do PPE. But in the end, I thought, you know what? law is quite a good subject to study, and even if I change my mind and I hate it in the end, at least I'll have got a good degree out of it. So I applied to law, was very lucky to be successful to get my top choice. So I studied a specialized degree pathway in international law and globalization at the University of Birmingham. And I had a really great time there. I loved that the course was specialized towards kind of international elements because, again, it sort of brought the commercial side of things, the international side of things into law, which I thought was brilliant. But once again, I was studying a law degree and I didn't know if I wanted to be a lawyer. So I was sat at my computer. I started university in September 2020. So if we can all cast our minds back to 2020, we can all remember vaguely at least what was happening at that time. And I really didn't have anything else to do but to sit at my computer, whether that was to watch Netflix or to study or to research my future career options. So I spent a lot of time at events like this virtually. I spent time on events where John was talking. I saw all of Emma's social media posts, and all of that sort of inspired me towards law, enough to make some applications to law firms for first-year schemes. But I was also still a bit nervous about that, so I did some other programs. So I spent some time virtually in an investment bank, in a Big Four company, and then in some law firms, including my now future employer, Weil. So that was really interesting. And I still, again, by the end of it, I'd done a few weeks in all these different industries, and I was still quite unsure. So I carried on through university. In my second year, was very luckily offered a vacation scheme at Weil and also an internship at one of those Big Four companies. And I did both of them. And I was still sitting on the fence, and I was very lucky to have both of those offers at the end, but I was still trying to make that decision and weighing it up. And the way I looked at it was the work that I enjoyed in the Big Four. So I was specifically in tax accounting. And the work that I enjoyed there was very commercial, but it also had some kind of legally elements to it. Things like looking at a tax deed or something like that has a sort of legal element. So I thought, you know what, again, the legal lean, I'll bite the bullet and take the training contract. And I'm so glad I did, which led me to being here, of course. And that was really great. But something that I've missed out a lot in this kind of story is the networking that we've been talking about. And something that's on the slide as well is my work as an engagement director at Grow Mentoring. So I've been volunteering with Grow since I started my degree pretty much in 2020, behind the scenes. A big thing that's important to me is giving back. I think in my journey, I've been so lucky that the way that I've made connections and that I've networked and that I found my way into the industry is the kindness of people's hearts to take time with someone who maybe doesn't have a background where their parents are lawyers or from another background. My parents didn't go to university. I didn't have a lot of professional connections, similar to Emma. And so it was, it was a lot to kind of enter the industry. And so reaching out to people on LinkedIn or people taking the time to mentor me was a huge thing. And so that's something that I wanted to give back in. And I think it's really interesting to talk about mentoring in terms of networking, because I think that my mentors over the years have been some of the most helpful people in getting to where I am today. So I thought I'd kind of give you guys some top tips if you have a mentor, if you're thinking about getting a mentor, if you don't really know what's the point in having a mentor, but someone that can guide you along the way can be really helpful. So firstly, it's good that your mentor has been there. So when I say been there, they are potentially much more senior than you, but they've been sat in this exact seat. When I say that I've been sat in your seat, they've also been sat in your seat. They might have just done it a few years prior. And this is really helpful because it makes a safe space and it fosters a situation where you're able to have conversations and make mistakes. You can ask questions and you won't know the answer, and they might not know the answer either, but you can just keep this situation and relationship where it's not awkward to ask those questions. And so if you set foot in a law firm or if you set foot in a networking event that's maybe a bit more formal than this one, you're not so afraid because you know what that's like. Obviously, it also kind of requires you being open a little bit to feedback and to criticism, which is difficult. And I found that really tough myself. My mentors talked a lot about the way that I would behave when I was nervous, like if I'd be fiddling with something or I wouldn't make good eye contact. But those things are all really helpful to know. And so them being there, it's a kind of kinder way for it to come across, I think. Secondly, your mentor obviously can also kind of teach you things. I think we were talking a lot about LinkedIn, and that's something that I found a really useful tool, but it can be hard to know how to reach out to people on LinkedIn. What's an appropriate way to ask someone for support or help? How do you come across them in a way that's not generic, that's not just, please give me your time? Because people are busy people, and as much as they want to help and talk, if they're having 30 invitations of these flooding their inboxes, they're probably going to want something a bit more. So learning how to do that, things like email etiquette and things like that are things that are not natural to us as human beings until we know them. So it's just good to be able to think about that and to ask those questions if you need them. As well, a mentor has their own network and their own connections. When I think about networking, I think about, it's kind of like a big Venn diagram. So I have my own little network, and that might be my family, my friends, people I know at university, people I know from work. But then each of those people also has their own little bubble and their own network. And when you see this on, I'm sure a lot of you use LinkedIn, it will say you have your first connections, your second connections, your third connections. And so, you know, I may be connected with John, and John may be connected with some of his work colleagues who I don't know, but maybe in the future, I might be looking for some support on something that they know something about. And so by having a connection to John, I can make that further connection outwards. And so I think networking, even if you speak to just one or two people at an event, suddenly you have access to this whole world of other people who you share something in common with. And it can be something as simple as knowing someone they know. I mean, that's how, in so many ways, the industry works. And when you see people who their parents work in law, or someone else that they know very well works in law, they have that preemptive connection. So it's kind of on you, I suppose, if you don't have those connections, to make them yourself. And that's what I think I found really helpful with my mentors, was that even if they didn't have the answers to my questions, perhaps someone in their network did. And that was really, really useful. Finally, I think community is really good in mentoring. Obviously, mentoring you typically think of as a one-on-one relationship. I guess specifically in the sense of Grow Mentoring, our charity has grown a lot in the years that it's been founded. There's over 30,000 people in our online community, over 10,000 people paired with their own mentor, and we run lots of events throughout the year in person and online. And so having other people, having your peers as well to talk to and to relate to, can just help so much to feel more engaged in the legal world and to make those steps. And having someone to do it beside is so helpful too, because you see each other's mistakes and you see each other's successes, and you can keep driving and pushing each other forward. And I think that's just one of the best things that I've seen. So with that to say, I guess what I would say is that if you can even make one or two connections tonight, whether that's just a little conversation with really anyone here, you've grown your network substantially more than those one or two people. And if you keep in contact with them, again, it just multiplies. So if you're kind to people, if you're considerate to them, if you deliberately make connections and you're honest and you're helpful, it all comes back to you. So just get out there and have a chat.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. There are so many good things that I heard in that, but just to extract a couple of things to emphasize, I think there was a reference at various points to Meg being indecisive, and indecisive is perhaps a negative quality. Some people might look at it, but I think both in terms of paying tribute to that quality, but also in terms of thinking about how you use language more positively. If you're indecisive, obviously it means you think very carefully about making the right decision. And that actually is a really positive attribute. And clearly there is, indecision can be a negative one, but I think actually taking that and realizing the positives that come from it is really important. Meg also used a word several times in her talk, which was the word lucky. And I think that's partly reflective on her as a person and the way that she, that's the way that she sees herself. But there seemed to be a common theme in there, that if you enter competitions, if you put yourself forward for things, if you do, you end up with opportunities. And they don't always work out for you, but the more that you put yourself forward, the more likely it is that you will end up being a winner. Somebody has to win. And if you put yourself forward, you end up being more lucky. There is an old adage, I think, about somebody who's good at sport and seem to be more successful in putting. Well, it's because they practiced a lot. So the more you practice, the luckier you get. So I think that was important. Also, I think, and this is the theme that's come through from other people, something happened that really wasn't, good news. You can't do the subjects you want to do. Tough luck. And you can respond in many different ways to that. It can be, abusive, aggressive, frustrated, go and hide away, or you can say, okay, well, I'll have to do something else then. and it may not be the first choice, but sometimes when you do those things, you discover things that you wouldn't have tried unless you've been forced into that situation. So sometimes it's almost good to force yourself into a situation of trying new things because you just don't know. And again, we've heard from everybody's insecurity. So I'll add my own insecurities in. As a teenager, my voice broke at the same time as Cole's. I left school, feeling as if, John, I've got to do something different here because this isn't working. So I entered the Amateur Sports Commentator of the Year competition, aged 18, having done no public speaking at all, no school plays, nothing at all, no reason at all why I should have done well. But I ended up runner-up in that competition. Now, if I'd won the competition, I'd be off at the Euros now and wouldn't be sharing tonight. So let's be grateful that I only came runner-up. But it transformed me from being somebody who felt, well, I haven't really got any talent. Suddenly I've got a talent. And it could be a talent that I'm using 35 years later to host an event because I'm seemingly quite good at public speaking. I didn't know that at the age of 18. I've tried lots of other things since, many of which have not been successful. I go dancing on a Thursday night. I'm a hopeless dancer. Strictly will not come knocking on my door. But I get enormous pleasure, doing something with my wife that we hadn't done previously and getting a social benefit from that. That means that even though I'm mighty frustrated that I can't do the foxtrot properly, that, actually not bad at the cha-cha-cha, but well, that's another thing. It's still something that is an attitude that has pervaded, and you're going to have these long careers and you're going to get to my age where you've done a lot of things many times over. And I've still got to get out of bed in the morning and want to go to work. And I've still got to be pushing myself to be better and better. And it's that sort of sense of trying new things that's really important. And the mentoring bit, obviously, it's dear to Meg's heart. And I think it's really important. We run a mentoring scheme here at the university. And almost always, both the mentors and the mentees come back and say it's been a really valuable experience. So if you are coming to the university, then look out for that and do put yourself forward. But that's mentoring with a capital M. It's been arranged. It's been, right, we've got these people, we'll put you together, we'll tell you how you're supposed to react with each other. But the mentoring with a small m is really powerful. You don't have to call someone their mentor. If it's someone you go to and ask for advice and they're willing to give you advice back, then that is a sort of mentoring relationship. And it can happen day in, day out, and you don't really realize it. So I think go looking for those people, and it can work both ways. And I think the interesting point that Meg made about if she in the future might see one of my connections as being something that's useful for her, then what needs to happen is that she can't come along to me in 5 years' time and say, John, do you remember we did that event 5 years ago? Can you do me a favor? I want to meet this, 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 and this. Because I will remember Meg, of course, but you don't get, the relationship doesn't work of, can I please have. You've got to have a build-up of relationship. And I sometimes talk about this in terms of scores. No relationship, 0 out of 5. If you don't even know the person, nothing's going to happen. Meet someone on an evening like this evening, introduce yourself, you're up to a 1 out of 5. If it goes through to LinkedIn and you have an exchange, it's up to 2 out of 5. There's a relationship building. You've probably got to get to 3 and probably 4 before somebody will really be willing to do you a big favor, unless they see something in it for themselves. But once you're up to 3 or 4, that's a really powerful relationship. You don't really need many 5s, and 5s are quite hard to keep at 5. You're almost putting disproportionate effort to keep them happy. You're almost better turning a 2 into a 3 than keeping a 5 at a 5. At the Legal Cheek virtual vacation scheme in the summer of 2020, I introduced the event with Alex Aldridge from Legal Cheek. And in the 5 minutes that I was talking, I got 800 requests for a LinkedIn connection. 799 of those I really can't remember, but there's one person who I'm still in touch with, and we know when it started, and we've had conversations many times over. The relationship is a 3 or a 4 there, but there's plenty of others that are now back to 0. So again, this desire perhaps on LinkedIn to go for quantity, another one, perhaps again think more a bit about the quality and actually try and think, if I can have better quality relationships rather than be proud to have reached a huge number, then that might be quite useful. I'm sure that certainly for Colin, for Emma, when you've got that large number of followers, that large number of people who are interested, it's quite hard to have relationships with all of them. So a few things to bear in mind. Now we've reached that point in the evening. Time management is very important. Look at that clock, 7 o'clock. It may not be the right time, but it's the right time for me. Where we're going to invite you to ask some questions. We've got some pre-submitted ones. So if you're not feeling confident enough to speak up, then please don't worry about it. But hopefully in this intimate, informal atmosphere, and having heard what you've heard from the people today, and there's so much more that they can give. They've just really given introductions about themselves. this is an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So is there anybody in the audience who would like to stick their hand up and have a microphone put in front of them to ask a question to one or more of our esteemed guests this evening? Excellent.
I have a question for all of you, really. Just in terms of volunteering, was there any useful experiences that you had in a volunteering or pro bono capacity in your legal path?
Meg appears to be nodding to this, so Meg, do you want to kick off with your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually I do a bit of TikTok, but it's very small. But I was going to say this, I was like, wait, I need to pre-context this. I made a TikTok very recently about this, actually. I think volunteering experience was probably one of the most important things. I say this about a few things. One of the most important things in my journey to getting a training contract, and in general in my life. My role in Grow is voluntary, but in terms of pro bono work, I did 2 years in a legal advice clinic at my university. And I think it gives you so many new skills and perspectives on the world. Firstly, having those interactions with real people with real problems who you're trying to really solve something that is very close to their heart and very tough on them. But then obviously, of course, there's interaction with people, so solicitors, barristers, and other people that are supporting you in that way. And having tangible skills where, you might have to make an attendance note of the meeting, you might have to do a follow-up letter to the client, you have to be conscious of, different biases that you may have or may not have. You have to be thinking about, has this client brought the correct ID along to the appointment? Can we make it go ahead? Do I need to call them and check they're on their way and it's okay? Are there any accommodations that I need to make? I think it's these sort of skills that sort of put you ahead of some people in entering the legal industry, and that you've just seen things of the world. But any volunteering is really helpful, and of course also builds your network, that you're able to communicate well with people, speak with people from different backgrounds. So yeah, I definitely say volunteering is a really good one.
Yeah, a little bit different 'cause I'm not a lawyer, but for me, giving back was a massive part of having the platform that I had. Like, I was fortunate to be like the most followed surveyor on LinkedIn, which isn't hard, to be fair. But there was a point, it was just after COVID, and I know a lot of my peers had struggled mentally being at home. A lot of people lost their jobs. It was a real tough time for the property sector initially. And we decided to put on the sector's first mental health conference. And it was all fun. There was no money. We put our own money in, and it was one of the best things we ever did in terms of received in the market. And it was incredible. It was like free therapy, which was great from the start. But it was so wonderful to see people like John, who comes across so well and so articulate and wonderful, and who you look up to, and then they'll come out and just completely open up to everyone and just completely like because you look at certain people, just think they've got everything together, and if you can help that one little person in your sector, in your world, just by volunteering some time, and that's a little bit different to pro bono work, but it still takes up a lot of time personally organising these events. It means the actual world, and not only does it help that person and it helps, it makes you feel good, but word spreads. And I think sometimes just being a good person, just helping people, it goes a hell of a long way. And like you say, for your reputation in your sector, in your world, people know you're a good person. And we will always look for anyone in when we hire surveyors, who, like I said, are similar to solicitors, who has gone an extra mile, who has done pro bono work, or has gone, volunteered in certain charities, etc. So it is, for me, it's a vitally important thing to do if you do have the time.
Similar to Meg and Col, I always like to give back. So I've always engaged in short charity stints. So I'll do a run and I'll raise money, or the 3 Peaks or something, and there'll always be something behind it, or locally raising money for Stoke and the local area. But I wanted something a little bit more. So I was looking for a longer term charity thing, because I was like, do I start volunteering in charity shops? And I was like, I want an actual role that is going to continue to give back, and I can grow in that as well. So I had a look around, and there's a charity called CGL, Change, Grow, Live. They do a lot of things, like they help with rehabilitation of prisoners, things like that, but they also do a lot with children in care. And there's a something legislated that means every child in the system has a right to have an independent visitor, IVs they call them. And a lot of children in my local area didn't have one because there was not enough volunteers. So I was like, right, I'm going to do that. And it involved a training course, and I got to meet loads of people and learn. Again, it's all networking. Like, the people that I've met there are incredible because they all want to give back just as I did, and I've still stayed friends with them today. But then I was paired pre-COVID with we call them YP, my young person, and they didn't have any of the skills that you'd expect of someone of their age. You have to be careful because of confidentiality, but someone of their age would have been able to do, like, you can imagine what they'd be expected to do at, say, between 7 and 10, but they didn't have that ability because they hadn't had the upbringing that we'd or other people have been blessed with. So it was the IV's responsibility to be someone outside of the system, so not police, not social services, not their foster parents, not anybody else who knows all of their files, to help them to build relationships, help them to learn what can be confidential and what not, and help them to learn how to do the basic skills that they'd be a little bit nervous and shy about asking their foster parents for, because they weren't impressed because they want to be permanently with them and don't want to have to move again. So I took that on, and I've been doing it for what, 5 years now, and it's been such a blessing to me in so many ways I can't describe. Because going back to how I feel about law generally, I felt a little bit uncomfortable just working with money all the time. Like, I work in house, it's just millions. We're working with a contract millions. I'm sure you've got experience of that as well. I felt a little bit dirty and a little bit like I'm just making rich people richer, or I'm protecting rich people from, and just because of the way that I was brought up, very working class, I think I wanted to add a little bit of an edge to that. Final thing to mention about it is, of course, there's all of the good things and the rewarding part, and the young person has given me so much. I still meet with them now, and they're an amazing part of my life. I was very lucky to be matched well. Sometimes you can switch with the young people that you get, but it's the second most thing that's been asked about in all of my interviews for my in-house legal roles. The first one's my gap year, which most people told me was a massive mistake at the time. Turns out not. So no to those guys. And yeah, the second thing is the charity work, and then you get onto legal experience. So if I haven't sold it to you enough in terms of the stuff that CGL do, have a look in your local area, by the way, because there are children in care that are crying out for independent visitors to help them, whether it's a shorter term or longer thing for you. But also from a CV and a legal side, I can say I researched the law and the safeguarding of children. I've got that extra element to my string to my bow that I'm really interested in, and it's always been mentioned in every interview that I've had.
It's a common line that people say, I haven't got the time for that. You couldn't find busier people than the ones we've got along here, and yet they find that busy people do manage to find the time to fit things in. So whether it's because you're passionate about something, as clearly we see coming across here, or you think, well, I'll just throw myself and see what happens, and it will be useful for the CV. Some of what I like to do is about very much futuristic rather than immediate. So for most of you, I think this will be a futuristic. Volunteering in things that your children do is massively advantageous to the father-child relationship and being a better person outside of work as well. Certainly I found that with again, learning the lesson. Didn't do it quite so much with my eldest son. Second son, I'm going to be more active and involved, and that certainly I think has paid huge dividends in terms of personal satisfaction as well as professional. And you must look at your future as being both professional but also the personal side of things. Excellent first question from the back. Do we have any more that people would like to ask? Yes, there's one. The back is the place to be tonight.
You were talking about relationships on LinkedIn and taking them from a 1 to a 2 and further. How do you take it from a 2 to a 3?
Very good question. Very good question. I think it depends upon the nature of the person, the nature of the relationship, the nature of the opportunity. You won't always find people that you would naturally choose to want to be around. They may well be figures that are in the same level of industry of you, same sort of line of work, and therefore they're useful to have a relationship. But it isn't easy because you don't share the same attitudes and the same experiences. So I think that can be a little bit harder. There are others that you will gel with really quickly, in which case you know, you'll really enjoy their company. You will almost seek out, are you going to that event next week? Oh, so am I. That would be great. We'll see each other again. But I think it comes over a period of time. And sometimes it's a, you know, it's a quality interaction. So, you know, I'm going to go to this event and, you know, it's going to be around a table and it's going to be for the whole day. We're on the same table. We get lots of opportunity. Another one might be, you know, we might bump into each other at a networking event, but hardly have time to say anything other than, hi, how are you? But I think it comes down to, and Meg sort of referred to this sort of stakeholder management, that if you have a look at all of the stakeholders, you want to keep some people close around you that you can have as your confidants. And then you look around and think, well, who would it be useful to have a relationship with? And sometimes those people, you know, they will emerge from nowhere. Other times they're people that have been around and about and you pick up. But you know, there's no official scoring mechanism. And it can be dangerous sometimes to compare. You've got me down as a 4. I only had you as a 1. That's trouble. And obviously this can also go into personal relationships as well as professional ones. But I think you sort of get a sense of, could I go to this person? Often it happens with, you know, could I ask this person for work experience? Can I ask them for something? That it comes with experience to know, I think I've got a chance here. You know, if I don't know them well enough, you know, are they going to be offended? Are they going to, then you're probably still on a 1, 1.5. But if you feel, I feel I can ask this question, even if they say no, I feel I'm ready to ask the question, then you're probably okay. It comes with time, comes with experience, and is not particularly scientific. So I think it's probably more about, there are some noughts out there that would be great to identify and think, what can I do to get them on the score chart? And sometimes when you, in this time pressured world, think, well, I've got 2 events to go to, one with lots of 5s. I'll have a great time. I love those people. They'll be great fun. One with lots of 1s and noughts. Hard work, hard graft, but probably I might benefit from it. You don't have to go to that one, but if your mindset is strategic, I want to boost those relations, you will. If actually you're somebody that enjoys other people's company and that's what gives you the thrill, you'll go to the 5s and perhaps recognize that's the sort of person you are. Cole's talked about personal brand. Personal brand is really important. Reputation. What do people say about you when you're not there? You have no control over that. You'll go home this evening and someone might say to you, what were the speakers like? And you will have your own judgment. None of us can influence, say something nice about me. You will say what you say. And I think that again is, you want it to be authentic. You want it to be something that I feel I've heard people as they really are, rather than they perform. So I sort of saw something about them, but I'm not sure if it's the real them. And I think authenticity is really, really important. I hope I've answered your question. Any other questions from the back row? No pressure, Peter. Forward over here.
Hello to our panel. My name is Newman. Thank you for your time today. I want to ask a question about introspection, because it's very interesting what you were saying, Meg, about indecision. And considering your background with growth mentoring, I was kind of curious about what level introspection is important to careers, early careers, because, you know, as you said before, there's many different ways into law and many different things you can try to do, but to what extent should we think inside and think, what is my skill? What should I ask? Or should we leave that to the mentors and things like that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Wow. I think that in one way it's very, very important, and in the other extent it's not. So many of the things that I talked about doing were things that I didn't think that hard about. Apart from to make the applications themselves, I just thought, I'll just try something new and see where it takes me. I think in making those decisions, it's just exploring. I think when you're really, really early in your career, what's really good is to get your feet in as many different ponds as possible and to say, here, let me try everything. If you're unsure, if you are sure, then you have to focus on what you want. I think when it really matters about understanding yourself and having that introspection, having those real deep conversations with yourself or with someone else about yourself and what they see in you, is when it is coming down to making those final sort of decisions. So perhaps when applying to, if you're interested in the solicitor route, the training contracts, or the bar route, like when you're applying to a particular chambers or whatever it is, because at that point you're making a very strong, very firm, potentially decision about at least 2 years of your life. Realistically, probably more. And so at that point, I think you have to really sit with yourself and think, you know, who am I as a person? What do I enjoy? So a lot of people ask me, you know, Meg, why on earth have you picked a US firm? They're so well known for these crazy long hours and the work's really hard and they treat you like horrible and they're all these sorts of things. Firstly, obviously, that's not true. And it very much depends on where you are. And my firm culture, I think, is brilliant. Obviously, there are those long hours and I do have to sit with myself and think, how long am I willing to do that? Am I willing / able to do that? If I were to be 10 years in the future, would I be willing or able to do that? And so at that point, I think when you're making those big decisions, you really have to be inside yourself. But in some other times, I think you have to make a snap decision. Coming to an event like this was always a snap decision for me. It was, well, it's on. I think it would be good for me. And because if I take too long sometimes over a decision, I get that nervous indecision that I was talking about before, where I would say, oh no, actually, I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm comfortable interacting with all these different new people. So yeah, it's a bit of both, I think, and you have to juggle what works best for you. I hope that answers. Yeah.
Please do.
When it comes to networking in general, obviously we're in our early stages of our career, we're trying to define ourselves. A lot of the people who we might network with have already, to some extent, not entirely, but to some extent, they've already defined themselves. They've already figured out a lot about themselves. And we're still here. Let's say, for example, I'll put myself forward. I'd like to go into the city and become a commercial solicitor. And maybe it could be mergers and acquisitions, maybe it could be real estate. But if I go to someone who has already made those decisions, they know how they made that journey, they know who to talk to. Maybe those steps don't work for me. Maybe I shouldn't even be taking those steps. So to some extent, that's why I was focusing on introspection. I just wanted to understand, do you think it's better to try and get in touch with everyone or just focus on one specific area?
I think it really depends what you have the time and the energy for.
Yeah.
And I think as well, just being honest with people. One of my most really valuable mentors in my journey was actually a serious injury lawyer. She had really no connection to the commercial or corporate world. And while she had connections who could help me with those specific questions, the very legal type of questions, what she could help me more with was, well, you know, how do you feel about the experiences that you're having? What do they make you think you want to do next? You know, how do you feel about your network and your community? How do you feel about all these different sorts of things? So I think you need to find people who can challenge you in different ways. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, I think maybe mergers and acquisitions. So all of these mergers and acquisitions lawyers and then some other corporate areas just in case. I think finding a few people who can help you in a variety of ways might potentially help more. And obviously you can change your mind. Sometimes people are there to help you for a season, and sometimes they're there for life. It's like friends and other people in our lives. We have people that we're close with, and whether they're a 5 forever or a 5 for 3 weeks, it doesn't, you know, at the end of the day, if you're both happy with that situation and it's serving you both, then that's okay.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add something generally on introspection and direction, because it's helped me a lot in terms of who I would like to speak to and who I think where my strongest network lies. I did not know for a long time what I wanted to do because I couldn't find it, but what I did know is what I didn't want to do. So if you're not sure on the direction that you want to go right now, and that's very common, you won't be alone. As long as you don't know what you don't want to waste energy on, as Meg says, it's choosing what you've got the time and the energy for. Don't be forced down a hole of chasing something that you are not interested in, because going back to the start, you'll feel the least comfortable there. You won't feel yourself, you'll lose authenticity, your personal brand will be all over the place. So if you don't know where you want to go, that's fine. But just if you don't know what you don't want, don't bother chasing that. Move it to the side and continue to explore in the pond that you're comfortable in.
Great questions. Thank you. You want to add anything?
I think for me, it's putting yourself in a position where you can find, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, exactly what pathway I wanted to be pursuing in Savannah as a whole. You know, various pathways. Initially, you think money, money, money. Like, where am I going to go? How can I get there? But I've learned throughout, even to this day, I don't know if Savannah's what I want to do for the rest of my life. You know, it's been a stopgap. It's allowed me to have a wonderful life, and you know, to financially benefit, but it doesn't necessarily fulfill me like emotionally and morally. I mean, like you said, we make rich people rich. You know, that's what we have to do. And I think sometimes you do have to look at yourself and what, you know, when you get to 50, 60, 70, 80, you look back on your career and have you necessarily done something that has fulfilled you? And I think that becomes more and more important. Obviously, initially in the current world we live in, you do have to think about the money financially, like we completely lying if it's not that. But follow your heart, man. Follow your gut. Your gut doesn't lie. And if you're in a situation where you don't feel comfortable, then just don't go for it. But if it is the difference between feeling uncomfortable in the wrong way, but uncomfortable in the fact that it makes you feel a little bit nervous, push yourself through that barrier, and never ever compare yourself to anyone. And their journeys are always going to be completely different. They might have had a leg up there, or they might have just met someone by chance. Like, you'll create your own luck, and just put yourself in that opportunity to do that. It'll happen.
Any further questions from our audience? We've got a couple of questions that have been sent in, so perhaps I will move to those now. One of them sort of picks up a little bit on the question at the back about the twos and threes, which we'll put to Emma first. How can you tell if you've made a good connection with someone or are just having a general chat with them? So this is a question from Sophie. A good connection versus something that was quite pleasant but actually maybe not going anywhere.
I think it's effort. The key's in the effort. If somebody's making an effort with you and you want to make an effort with them. I was thinking back when you were talking about LinkedIn and how you'd get from a 2 to a 3 and all of that good stuff. I get DMs quite regularly from people, and I felt a little bit guilty when I was thinking about it, because sometimes someone will message me, have you got any work experience? I'd love to work in house. And that stays in my request box. Because first of all, there's no manners, like you've got to use your manners, and you're laughing. But I get so many. But second of all, I'm not going to want to put effort into that person because you're a 0. And in fact, you've probably gone down to a -1 now because you didn't have a relationship in the first place and you screwed it for yourself. So next time you send me a decent, or you try and build a relationship with me, you meet me, I'm going to then see that you've done that and know that it's a little bit false. So I think when you know that you've made an effort, when you've made an effort with someone, you know that you've got that authenticity, you can be yourself around them, you've got that connection and you're helping each other out. It's about these little favors here and there. Send someone an article you think they might be interested in, or I'm going to this event, are you going to be around? It doesn't matter if you've not spoken for a while. Even if they can't make it, it shows that you've thought of them and that they've thought of you. I think it's those regular touch points over time. So then I was thinking about the people that have done that with me. So I've had in-house Potter for 5 years now, and it doesn't matter whether you followed me for a month or a year, it's the amount of times that we've engaged and how well we know each other. And then someone would have asked me, have you got work experience? And I'll voice note them back and I'll spend a few minutes explaining, I'm really sorry I haven't, but this is what you can do, this is where you can go. Have you thought about doing X, Y, Z? So I think that's the importance in the going from a 2 to a 3. And when you know you've got there is when you've made sufficient effort and you know them enough to be able to ask the questions and not feel a little bit awkward about it.
A little tip, I think, for any of you who might be thinking about trying to connect with Emma on LinkedIn after tonight, and probably the same for all of us really, is please can I connect? There's nothing personal about that at all, and nothing that stands you out. I was really interested in what you said on ... earlier this evening and would like to connect. That just makes it a bit more personal. And the one person from the 800 that stood out not only included a message about the things I'd said in the 2 minutes that I'd spoken, but also asked me a question, which prompted me to respond to the question, which prompted a question back, and the relationship went. So I thought that was quite skillful in terms of trying to make the conversation start rather than just be click yes, accept, and then off into the ether.
I think one thing I'd say, John, that is I've got an example of a really brilliant DM from a young guy who was just starting off his career. He must be 20, 21. And he started off by just liking and commenting on certain posts. And that, like, LinkedIn flirting is a really great way to start getting from a 1 to a 2. Start getting yourself up there. And this young guy, I've never heard of, but I recognise the name just because I come up in my notification. And this guy is incredibly well connected. Like, his best friend's dad is Vladimir Putin's lawyer. This guy is.
Be a little bit careful, Nicole.
Got to think about the money, John. All right. And maybe 2 seconds. I maybe speak like I'll try to find this, but you're so right that having a personalised message that's something that's actually looks like they thought about what you said, and you do just I don't know you, but I don't think that you guys probably would say you have the request box and your actual personalised messages.
Yeah.
Terrible messages you get, like, and it's not because you're being rude. It's just they're being rude by sending that message and not putting any effort into it. Like,
Whilst you're finding it, and coming back to the point again, it really helps to understand people. So we've given away, you know, that if you send something to us, we're sort of caring people. The nature of what we're doing here tonight is that we really care. There are people out there who are just, you know, I've only got a spare second. I'm only going to put that, and they won't need that interaction. In fact, they'll be insulted that someone's asked me, I haven't got time to answer questions. So it isn't a one size fits all. You might actually get it wrong by trying, you know, to do it in the nice, friendly way and discovering the person is not a nice, friendly person in the way that they conduct business.
found
He's
it.
found it. Right.
Found it.
Teamwork.
Love Tom. Hi, Colin. Hope you're well. Just wondering where you're based. Okay, fine. I'm like, okay. Would love to meet for a coffee and have a chat about. God, I'm so tired. Oh, no, what have I done?
Got a long conversation with this guy. I think he might be a bore.
Yeah.
He's scrolling.
Bring him in. He's here tonight.
Oh God, what have I done? That must have been right. Sorry guys, bear with me 2 seconds. I had it up. Just wondering where you're based. Would love to meet for a coffee and have a chat about how you have come to be where you are and advice for someone in construction who really wants to push to be a high flyer. Looking forward to hearing from you, Tom.
Yeah.
And I was like, Joe, what, mate?
Well done, Tom.
You've got my attention.
Yeah.
And I just wondering when out for a coffee.
Yeah.
And then we like meet up with him every couple of weeks now.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So it's just put a little bit of effort into it.
Yeah. I do think that because I do think I was one of John's 800 connections back in the summer of 2020. But I've learned a lot of things since then. But I think as well, something that people have told me before is that lawyers sometimes can be quite vain. We quite like to talk about ourselves. And so if you ask us a question that comes from a place where you've actually researched our background or you've met us in an event and you've actually put in the effort to make that connection, then people are more than happy to talk about themselves and their lives and to help out, because humans are humans. In the same way that you guys would do it to people, you know, in school or whatever it is, then so would a lot of other people, I think.
Excellent. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give one final top tip, and then I'm going to give my final top tip, and then we're going to uncork the bubbly and have some food as well. So, Emma, if there's one thing you'd like to leave our audience with tonight, one final top tip, what would it be?
To be yourself.
Sometimes it's bad to go first.
I'll
Spot the spot.
elaborate. I know, yeah, I was like thinking, but it's the one I always go to, no matter the context, I think, because it always suits, and I'm sure you'll have different reasons, Cole, why it suits for you. But for me, if I'm not myself in the rooms, I could have pushed and forced and made myself a private practice person in the rooms that I wanted to be in and put the applications in and got someone else to write it for me. I wouldn't have been happy. You can't pay me any amount of money, and I genuinely mean that, to be there. And it's not to say to put you off. You'll have your own things on the flip side that you would absolutely never do in a million years. But if I would have not been myself and pushed into certain circumstances, whether it's networking, career, or generally, and I was living that out now, I would have a lot of regrets. And that goes for the rooms that you're in, the networking that you build, and the personal brand. Staying authentic and being yourself, it's only going to benefit you, and not like you'd be so misaligned in life too if you're not living something that you're passionate about and that you believe in. And you'll find the balance. Again, you might not know what that is yet, but I led with what I didn't want to do. I'm quite stubborn, so it's very easy for me to say never ever doing that, but I'll find something else that works. And I did that by being truly me.
Now, Emma could have stopped after be yourself, and that would have put Cole right on the spot. But she gave a bit of an explanation, which gave him plenty of time to think up of an alternative answer. Cole.
Thank you. I think for me, rejection is not lovely for anyone, and sometimes you will meet someone at an event and it won't necessarily go as well as you thought it would, or there's no connections, no spark. It's just there's nothing there. It's a zero. But you never know that you never know when you're going to meet someone that's going to be the best contact of your entire life. And I went to a networking event once. It was an awards night. I had to put clogs on the table. I bought a ticket on my own because I was like, I need to go to this award event. I've just started up a business, and I got sat next to a woman called Emma, and we just got chatting. And that woman I've just started up a new firm, which given us over £250,000 of work every year since then, just from that one impromptu sit next to that one person. So just never ever let a bad connection knock you because you could be just one connection away from something that's going to change your life.
And it's not me, I'm not that rich.
It's definitely saying this.
I'm in house, calm down.
And Meg, your top tip?
I think it's just to do it, and to do it scared, to do it nervous, to do it with whatever you have in the background that you're feeling uncomfortable or unhappy with. Obviously, if it's somewhere you don't want to be, don't be there. But if it's somewhere that you do think you want to be, then regardless of how you're feeling, you just got to try. And then the more you do it, the easier it will get. Because when I made that LinkedIn connection with John 4 years ago or whatever, I made the fatal error, I'm sure, of just hitting follow or whatever it was. But you learn over time, and you learn how people click and how you get on with different people. And like Cole said, it doesn't work for everyone, but you just have to try, I think, and that's the best way forward.
Excellent. My final top tip is to leave you with another networking tip. So it started off with try and think about how you introduce yourself personally. And the next one is about name badges. So we've had a little bit of banter about names today. Names are important. You know, you're given that, it's your identity, and it's nice to build relationships with people with real names. So that's why very often at networking events you'll have a name badge. It's not the only reason. The organisers are always very carefully thinking, you know, we can tell who's come and who's arrived and how many people. So there's other reasons to it. You may go to networking events where there's a colour code. You think, well, what's all that about? Well, that's because the yellows are going in that corner, the blues in that, the red in the green, because we've worked out who's going to get on with who and who we want to know, where we want to find them, etc. So there are some strategic stuff that goes on. But having a name badge is important. There's games you can play with names. You know, you can try and be difficult with people and hide your name badge and mumble your name to make it difficult, or you can try and be extremely helpful. My mother-in-law was called Niria, and she always used to say Niria rhymes with Syria, so it's not Niria or whatever. So she was great at that. Other people will sometimes just make it difficult, think, you know, that really is hard. So if you've got a complicated name, it can be helpful to help other people. But the purpose of a name badge is also tonight is to tell you where it might actually go. And there's no hard and fast rule about this, but from now on you'll all wear it where I tell you to. And that is, it's so much easier, certainly with the name badges that you've been given tonight. The easiest place, I've now gone and lost my name badge. Put it up here. The easiest place when you've got one like this, if you're wearing a suit or something similar, is to click it on there. That's the easiest place to do it, it's there. But I would encourage you to wear it on this side. So there's one or two excellent practitioners in the room. And the reason for that is that when Lauren and I went, oh, she's recording, so I can't go back to Lauren. When Lauren and I did a handshake earlier on, into Lauren, she can see my name much more easily because it's there. Wouldn't be quite so easy over there. Does beg the question about, do we handshake these days? Because not everybody does, and there are cultural reasons, there are COVID and other reasons. So there's no obligation to handshake. And I thought this would be harder than it is, but actually, if you see somebody is clearly, you know, hands down, not coming forward, then you don't force it. You just allow it to happen naturally. If you are a handshaker, then not wet and limp, because that's unpleasant, and not so hard that you've got to go to A&E afterwards for an X-ray. So just nicely in between. We can practice that tonight as well for those that are willing. If you go away and obsessed from this now, I think I must put it on the right lapel, because John said, it doesn't clip on quite so easily. You have to use the pin. Now, if it takes you 20 minutes and if you emerge with blood all over your shirt, that's not a good look. So just pop it on this side and no one's going to escort you from the building and say you don't have the network properly. But if you can, go for the right lapel moving forward. Thank you ever so much for your time and attention. Thank you to all those who've been involved in organising tonight's event, some in front of me, some behind. Lots of effort does go into it. And one final round of applause to show your appreciation for our three excellent guests this evening.